Afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for attending the Public Sector Get in the Know session with us today. Today we have Praveen from Product Management with us, who's going to deep dive into our Workspace Security Suite. Thank you, Praveen.
Thanks, Kevin. So hello, everyone. My name is Praveen Raguraman. I'm responsible for our Workspace Security product line, and specifically today, I'm going to be talking about access control solution. And the goal is to provide you a good understanding of what the core features and capabilities are, and how it might help you address some of the concerns you may be seeing from a SaaS and web app access perspective. So with that, let me jump in. We have an agenda here. Today we're going to cover really kind of talk about what we see happening in the marketplace in terms of customer needs and what we are hearing from our customers and partners. We'll dive into the solution, get into different use cases that we can address, and towards the end, really talk about how this can actually be coming together into an end user experience that sort of allows you to access different kinds of applications through the workspace. We will be doing a demo, and I'd request you, if you have any questions, you can post them on the chat window. We will be monitoring the chat window, and if there are any other live questions or anything, we'll try to address them towards the end. With that, I want to first sort of start with a quick overview of how we look at security and sort of triangulating on what our overall security strategy is. So really, if you look at from the perspective of CIOs and CISOs, really security from the way we look at it is all about increasing trust. So when you have your end users in your organizations trying to access different applications, what you really want to do is to be able to provide the right level of trust and be able to ensure that people with the right level of identity are actually able to access resources within your corporate as well as your SaaS and other web app properties. Now, the other main goal also is, while you're establishing this trust through different mechanisms of identity, you also want to reduce the overall risk that access to different applications may pose. And here we're really talking about starting with the core tenets of visibility and analytics, and then being able to provide contextual access and enforcement. And third, and equally important, is security often gets in the way of end user experience. But for us, experience is actually a very crucial part of how we think of the digital workspace. So for us, that really means how can we make the overall process of access frictionless and easy, while from an operator and admin perspective, make this really integrated into their overall security delivery. And what's important is that Citrix as a company is really focused on enabling customers to their journey to the cloud in a hybrid mode. So this is absolutely critical for us, that many of the capabilities we build actually allow our customers to do that transition and kind of take that journey to the cloud, but also remember that they are in a hybrid deployment. So with that, I want to kind of first start with, what are the kind of needs that we hear from our customers. But before we do that, I do want to ask a quick question and kind of gauge what kind of audience we have today. So I'm going to launch a poll, and I'd appreciate if you can sort of provide us answers on, what your primary role or function is. And we will wait for 30 seconds before we close the poll. Okay, so I see a lot of you voting. I am going to wait for 5 more seconds. Probably let's give 5 more seconds and just kind of wait some more responses coming in, and I will be closing the poll now. Okay, so we do see that a lot of you actually have a good security background, as well as sort of a mixed audience here, both from security as well as network admin perspective. So that is very interesting, and we kind of typically see this kind of a mix in our audience. So it'd be interesting to get your feedback on the things that you see and how this kind of can help you with your requirements in your organization. With that, want to move on just really to go into the four crucial requirements that we actually see from our customers. One is that really when you look at the proliferation of SaaS and the modern web applications, we see a lot of requirements for a consistent experience, and single sign-on really plays a crucial requirement here, not only when you are coming in from the office, but also from remote locations. The other thing that we hear a lot from our customers is the ability to protect IP and provide governance over the SaaS and enterprise web applications. So what this really means is that you may have a lot of cases where your users are bringing in a SaaS application, but it may not have gone through a formal approval, but you're still responsible in ensuring that it is safe to use, it's meeting requirements from your perspective of what data actually is being shared, and then it actually follows your governance rules. So that is a crucial requirement we see and hear a lot. The third thing we hear a lot is ability to actually protect against web threats. And what's important here is this is not just about general access to the internet, but even applications that are fully sanctioned and might actually have links that might lead to third-party sites or what have you, and being able to not only provide a comprehensive web filtering solution, but also provide the ability to isolate content when it's required and provide the best mechanism, that kind of often comes up. And the fourth key requirement that we hear is really about having visibility to manage the user risk and behavior and drive that with analytics, so you can actually drive closed loop controls. So from the standpoint of the solution, these are the capabilities that we have within access control that really help address those core requirements. The first is obviously, in terms of establishing trust and authenticating users combined with single sign-on, and being able to deliver all these capabilities through different kinds of mechanisms through an access proxy. From a policy control perspective, what we really have is a variety of different controls that we'll be talking about, both on the endpoint as well as in the cloud. And finally, we'll touch upon analytics, which will allow us to understand how all this thing comes about, so we can really drive more closed loop controls. And what we are doing with access control is it's one single solution to provide secure access to a variety of different applications through an integrated cloud service. And with the goal of being able to drive this through the digital workspace that allows end users in your organization, whether they are using a SaaS application, which you may consume from a third-party cloud provider, or it could be a hosted enterprise web application that you're responsible for within your data center, and you still want it to be delivered along with virtual apps and desktops. And what access control has been designed is to combine this from an end user experience perspective with single sign-on and adding those core security controls that are required. So things like being able to add cloud app controls that are in line within the rendering of content, but then also bringing in native controls which allow you to have web filtering integrated into this process. So let's sort of jump in and see how it all works and how does access control as a solution, is integrated into Citrix Cloud. So the first thing I'd like to kind of point out is when you log into Citrix Cloud, you would basically see a variety of different tiles, these are all the different component services that are part of the access control solution. Obviously, as I mentioned, the workspace app or the workspace experience is the primary way you access different applications in terms of a unified experience for our end users. And we have a variety of services which are on the Citrix Cloud, which provide you various of these capabilities that I talked about. So let's kind of briefly touch upon the workspace. For those of you who probably may not be fully aware of what we do with the workspace app, this is essentially our evolution of our next generation of how we are integrating and unifying the experience. The first thing is that it's got a very easy and pleasant look and feel, but the most important thing is that we've really made a lot of effort in unifying different kinds of capabilities from the standpoint of accessing content. So there's a universal search bar, which allows you to reach and quickly look up any application or a file or a virtual app. It also comes with an embedded browser that actually renders all the content for SaaS and web applications, as well as the HTX content. And the most important thing is that it has a networking client, so we're actually making secure access to different applications right within the workspace and delivering all this through that unified experience in a secure manner. So let's talk about some of the different components and sort of, what are the capabilities that we have within the solution, and how do we actually bring this about together. So we'll do a little bit of a deep dive on each of the things that I talked about in the initial slide. The first one is two-factor authentication. So we have the ability right now to have a native two-factor application that will allow you to provide this secure experience. As you know, identity is a very crucial part of establishing that initial trust when you have access to different applications. And what I'm showing here is a very simple three-step process that you can use from an end user perspective to log in and tie this to your workspace. So any access to workspace is now fully secured through a native two-factor authentication mechanism. Now, we do have support for any TOTP or time-based OTP authenticator. So we have a Citrix SSO app that you can download, or you can use any authenticator like Microsoft or Google Authenticator to actually use this. So all of the authenticators that support the TOTP protocol are fully supported. And we're also excited about this other capability that we have actually recently introduced. It's available in tech preview right now. And the whole idea here is that we have a lot of customers who've made significant investments with their gateway and identity solutions and want to leverage that for some of the common cases, such as federating to other providers or even use things like radius-based authentication into providers like Okta or Symantec. So we now have the capability to actually support the gateway on-prem as an IDP. And what this does is that it allows you to expand on the use cases that you may have, or some of the two-factor and MFA use cases you may have, and still consume all of that in the context of end-user experience with the workspace. So this also allows you to sort of unblock if there are any capabilities that we may not fully yet support in the cloud, but also allows for that migration to the cloud in a more seamless and easy manner. So next I'm actually going to talk about single sign-on access and really talk about how we can make the whole idea of delivering SaaS and web applications easy and simple. Before I go do that, I do have another poll where I'd like to really understand from this audience on how well do you think you are using your SaaS and web apps accessing from a security standpoint. I'm going to launch a poll here. And this time we'll wait for 40 seconds just to give enough time for everybody to provide their answers. So the question is, how well are you protected by your current tools that you may have in your organization for end user access to SaaS and web applications? Okay, so I see about 30 to 35% of you have voted. Still kind of waiting for more people to submit their vote. I'm going to wait for 10 more seconds before I close the poll. Okay. So let's look at the results. So about half of you, close to 45%, 47% of you are kind of already having different tools. And this is something typical of what we see. A lot of people have made investments in different kinds of tools. But I do see that there are many of you who also would like different kinds of security tools, and there might be significant gaps in sort of how you believe you want your access to SaaS and web applications to be protected. So the idea here is for us to actually walk you through some of those kinds of capabilities on what we can do to augment the capabilities you may already have. So let's look at primarily SaaS applications. So most of you may be familiar with or using many of these applications already in your organizations, and single sign-on becomes one of the key feature enablers to make the whole idea of access to SaaS and web applications easy. But along with that, what we're doing is we're making the whole experience of how we deliver single sign-on very simple and easy. So within a gateway service, you have the ability to add any SaaS or web application. We have a library of hundreds of applications right now for single sign-on. These are SAML-based templates that we support. And you go through sort of a simple wizard that prompts you to set up your domain and your specific URLs that you want access. And what that does is we can very easily configure this end user access and publish it to your end users. As I mentioned, currently we support SAML 2.0, and we are looking at other variants of expanding this functionality in the future. Now, while SaaS applications are obviously proliferating, a lot of our customers also have significant investments on hosted on-prem applications, or what is called as enterprise web applications. And what we can do is really make the idea of eliminating the use of a traditional VPN for some of these use cases, and instead allow access to these applications through that integrated experience I talked about in the context of Workspace. So really, we have what is called as a gateway connector that you deploy within your data center. And now this allows really a seamless VPN, but a more web-enabled access into your hosted applications. Not only can we do single sign-on, but we can also make it easy for you to have the end-to-end access. This traffic does go through our cloud, but the benefit here is that you really don't have to manage these connectors or the service. It's all managed by Citrix, and these connectors are like virtual machines that you deploy within your enterprise, and they phone home into our cloud and are fully managed. So makes the delivery of hosted web applications that much more easy. And the main benefit is you really provide a modern web-like experience for your end users to consume their web applications similar to what they might be used to with SaaS. Now, I want to sort of jump into a little bit into the kind of policy controls and security features that we have built in to make the overall experience of delivering these SaaS apps and web apps more secure. So let's look at what are the kind of security controls we have. We have this functionality within the SaaS app workflow, and we'll actually also look at it when we do the demo. The main goal here is when you select a SaaS application or a web application, you're trying to deploy this, you have a variety of options to further provide that governance we talked about. So you can restrict things like provide copy paste, or restrict people from end users from accessing the clipboard, or navigating to different sites within the page itself. You can also watermark the application. So if someone were to take a picture of the screen, then there is a way for you to be able to at least enforce some level of controls in place, and that actually acts as a deterrent in many cases. Now, in addition to enforcing these controls on the browser, what we also can do within access control is every single link that is within your SaaS or published web application can be checked for content filtering. So this is basically the URL filtering capability that is natively built in. We do support more than 190 plus, and it's kind of close to 200 category of different content that we can either block or allow of access. But one other thing we can do is also, isolate this content through our secure browser service and redirect it so that you can still allow people to access this, but that access actually doesn't necessarily hit your endpoint. Also like to mention here that all the access that goes through the URL filtering goes through a reputation scoring mechanism. And we use this data in being able to assess the overall risk posture, so you can then get more, drive more contextual policies based on the kind of content that they're accessing. So let's talk a little bit more about the browser isolation that I talked about. So what we can do is when end users access any of their content through any of their different applications within Workspace, that content, when it goes to the Workspace app, goes through the web filtering module. And based on the policy that you have set up, like in this case, I had the example of Instagram. You may actually want to allow access to Instagram or Facebook, but you don't want that to actually be running within your network. So you can actually isolate that content completely. So what you can do is, based on that, you can actually redirect that traffic to the secure browser service, and the content is actually launched within a hosted browser that we are running within our cloud. And so that's what the secure browser does. And if that content is to be rendered, then you will completely be able to show that, and the end users are able to get to their content very easily. Now, let's talk about the analytics, right? Because all of this access that we're enabling and the security controls we're enabling, we want to be able to know what end users are accessing, so we can actually drive policy and really drive that, lower the risk posture that we talked about at the beginning. So what we can do within Citrix Analytics is provide you pretty detailed views of what kind of access is happening on your network, across your user base, as well as what it contributes in terms of risk posture. So based on the risk scoring mechanism, what you see here is any website or URL that we believe is tagged as malicious, is known to have potentially dangerous content, is tagged with a malicious tag. And then anything that might not necessarily be known to have malicious content but could be potentially dangerous is marked as dangerous. And then we also obviously list all the different kinds of things that are blocked, so you can very quickly know if your policy, web filtering policy, how it's working in terms of efficacy, and whether you should be modulating it further to adjust to your security concerns. Now, one other thing that we can do is we can provide pretty detailed drill downs based on a user's access, and you can filter all this data based on the type of access that is happening. And within that access, in Citrix Analytics, we can also do a deep down into a specific user's access and what is it that happened that contributed to the risk score that we provide for that user. Now, this risk score not only comes from access control, but this is aggregated across the different kinds of Citrix products that you may be using, such as endpoint management and Citrix files and so on and so forth. So we actually consolidate all that data to be able to provide a much more comprehensive risk scoring that allows us to then drive policy and maybe block someone who or take an action of blocking their access on the network. One other thing that we have, which is kind of very interesting, is the ability to actually do a lot of troubleshooting based on the different kinds of access. So we have a search and filter module with a lot of different kinds of search facets on the left side, as you can see here. And what you can do is very quickly narrow down if someone is complaining about their access not working, or if we have actually blocked some specific site, you can go and quickly look up that data. This has a historical view as well, so you can actually go back up to 30 days, I believe, right now, to look at all the kinds of access that happened. So this is another mechanism, instead of consuming purely from a dashboard perspective, also being able to do a lot of query-based filter and troubleshooting. Now let's look at how all this ties together in terms of the overall end user experience, and what does that experience look like when your end users may be using the workspace. So on the workspace, what I'm showing here is all the different applications. We have some SaaS applications, we have some virtual apps and desktops. And so when you don't turn off any security, which is the enhanced security policy control, then any access that you do for any SaaS application directly goes to the internet. So let's say if you have Salesforce turned on, but you don't have any security controls, then we don't enforce any controls from a web filtering perspective or any of the other controls we talked about, and they can access their application. So you have that control on a very granular basis, on an app by app basis. But let's say you turn on security, then we will open this within the embedded browser. And as I said, the Workspace app actually has this embedded browser built in. It's a Chromium browser that we have embedded. And depending on what controls you have turned on, you'll see a watermark or other functionality blog. Now, we don't stop here. Like we said, we have web filtering integrated with it. So every link that is accessed within this application, which is a sanctioned application, now goes through a check for whether that's allowed based on the filtering policy, and if it needs to be redirected into secure browser. Now, all this is happening automatically. Now, let's say your end users can also access their workspace through their native browser by going to the Workspace portal. In that case, we don't have a native embedded browser itself, but what we do is that if we have security turned on, then we will launch a container automatically. This is basically the secure browser, which is automatically launched. And within that, we will launch the embedded browser and apply the same policies that we talked about. But because this is already running within the secure browser, which is automatically instantiated, any secure browser policies that you have applied obviously will be allowed, and it'll actually act as the same as if it's redirected. So that's sort of the experience, the difference in experience, whether you have the native app installed or whether this is accessed through the web portal, which is the HTML5 interface. Now, we also support the SP-initiated flow for SaaS applications, where you might have hyperlink to a SaaS application within your own corporate portal, or this could be something that an end user may be typing in their browser. In that case, again, the same consistent experience is enforced, depending on whether the security is allowed or security is enforced or that bit is turned off. We will be able to go ahead and enforce the same policy controls. So in summary, what this really means is that as long as you turn on the controls, and this can be done on an app-by-app basis, you can provide the flexibility and choice for your end users to access your applications in any different way, and you can still enforce the right controls for governance for SaaS and web applications. Now, one other functionality that we're really excited about is the ability to actually control and govern SaaS and web access through the storefront. So we know a lot of our customers are on a journey to cloud, and you typically see a deployment like this where you have the storefront with the workloads, and they might be actually using the Workspace app to connect using a gateway for external users. And in this case, really the ask for us has been that, hey, can you actually make the SaaS application access for our end users work through the storefront while we are, sort of on the journey to the Workspace? So the answer is yes. What we do now is we do have a capability that's actually available in tech preview, where you can run a sync utility on your DDC, and what that does is the policies that you have set up for access control within Workspace are sort of imported in, and we can show the actual app within Workspace app published here. So what this does now, what this does is that the app now shows up within your storefront, and you can still go ahead and allow access or enforce policy controls. This only works for SaaS and web applications, which is where all the focus is for us from an access control perspective right now. But if you have any feedback on anything, or if you have any questions, do post that on the chat window, and we'll be happy to sort of take a look at that. But what this feature now does is it does allow you to start your journey on the cloud by accessing these applications within the storefront, and you need an entitlement for access control to be able to configure all the policies from the admin interface in Citrix Cloud. So some other functionality that is on our roadmap, which actually that we're working on, but I think is sort of important here, is we are working on bringing in new capabilities to provide things like preventing screen captures and obfuscating the data that may actually get through a keylogger. So these are some new capabilities that we're actually adding in, and this does require the full embedded browser. So this will not work if you are trying to access the Workspace through the HTML5 interface. This requires the full-fledged embedded browser to be installed. In this case, what we are doing is enforcing these controls locally within the browser itself, and that's why that requirement is there. But this is again something that we're working on, and it's available. We can make this available for tech preview if you have interest, and this is something that will be released soon. With that, I actually want to go through a quick demo and kind of show you how the whole admin interface works, and then we will take questions towards the end. So what I'm going to do in this demo is go into the library first and first set up the identity and access and show you the different options we have. So within the identity and access management, like I said, we have the two-factor configuration, which allows you to set up the two-factor auth more natively. And this is a functionality right now that is already available for you. If you look at the capabilities, you can enable or disable this within your Citrix Cloud. The next thing I'm going to actually do is go into the configuration for SaaS and web applications and sort of walk you through the steps that are required to configure a SaaS application or a web application. So you'll see within Gateway Service this icon, which launches this wizard. Within this, when you actually look at the library, you'll see a lot of these different kind of templates. And you can do a quick search. So let's actually look at G Suite, which is one of the applications we want to publish. Here, once I select that, what you'll notice is that you have the choice of accepting all the different default parameters. And here is where you set up your security controls. Now you can go ahead and be very granular about exactly the specific controls you want to apply. A capability that's actually not shown in this, but is that you'll also be able to configure or disable or enable this on mobile devices. Now we support SAML, and we pre-fill all the URL, basically the assertion and the relay URL automatically. You do have to configure your specific domain that will be used for the SAML assertion. And once you set this domain, then you will also be prompted for setting up the certificate. So we'll look that up in a minute. So what I'm doing here is setting up my domain in both the assertion and the audience functionality. And at any point in time, if you have a question on what these fields are on your SaaS provider, you can actually look up the documentation. Now, one other thing is you can export the metadata. Like I said, over here, this is the certificate that you upload within your SaaS provider. So I'm going to actually go ahead, copy paste that. In a newer version, we have the ability to download this, and we'll also be able to upload this here directly. So in the Google's admin interface, you have the different fields, and all I'm going to do is this is where you enter your gateway domain and upload the certificate. That's it. Once your app is configured for single sign-on, the next step is to configure it for end user access. So now I'm going to go ahead and set up some of the web filtering policies within the access control tile. When you log into the access control tile, what you will notice is we have the steps that we talked about in terms of the authentication, setting up the SaaS and web applications. So there's a very easy 3-step process that actually kind of guides you. In this case, now the last step I need to do is to configure my filtering policies. And what I've done here is I've pre-configured a filtering policy that blocks access to like a site like Pirate Bay, for example. And you can be very, very granular on exactly what you want to block. For example, you can even add additional URLs. And the way this whole mechanism works is we first check the specific URL that is blocked, and then check the category. So we always prioritize checking the specific URL for any of the URL filtering decisions. Now, one other thing that I kind of want to mention is we have the ability to actually configure the secure browser. We have already set up Instagram. Let's go ahead and actually add one other website here. So let's say we don't want to allow access to Snapchat, but only under the secure browser. it'll actually show up here as one additional entry in that list. And you have the option to choose the whole web filtering policy to customize it the way we've done, or you can also select from a list of presets that we already have created. With that, now I'm actually going to go back to the library and configure these applications for end users. So let's actually go back to G Suite and hit edit into manage subscribers. And within manage subscribers, here's where what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually, for my domain, select the different set of users to whom I'm going to allow access to this application. So I've already pre-created a domain called domain users. Let's select that. And once that's done, pretty much at this point in time, the application is ready for you to be able to use. Now let's look at the end user experience. So whatever we just published from an end user perspective, I'm going to log into the workspace and kind of show you how and what the end user experience will look like. So when we log in, we've set up our two-factor auth using the OTP functionality. So I just entered my password token using my authenticator app. And when I go into my applications, here you'll see all the different applications that have been published. So obviously, you know, we have in this case all the different files as well as the different folders, so on and so forth. So let's go back. Let's actually go and look up G Suite. That's the application we had configured for end user access. I mean, so obviously, if your list of applications is very small, that will show up in your recent. Otherwise, you know, you can always do the search. So you notice that now I'm actually seeing that bookmark, excuse me, the watermark show up for all my different access. Now I have some emails that I have here, and that's one of my blocked sites, right? Now what if I click on that link, it's actually going to block me from accessing that. In this case, I'm actually able to go ahead and access my actually the Google Doc, and that particular watermark will follow pretty much all the access that is allowed. So you see this Google Doc that's open with a watermark showing up. All right, so now let's actually go back and try to click on one of the links that we have actually prevented to be blocked. When you do that, you will be prompted with a message that will say, you know, you're not allowed to access this. So your end users know that this is restricted content. Now, we also had set up a secure browser policy for redirection for Instagram. And when that happens, what you'd notice here is that we're automatically launching a secure browser session. You notice that our workspace icon on the top, and within that, we are hosting the actual browser. So this is now fully rendered within the cloud. This content is actually not rendered on your local machine. So this allows you to actually now start providing the ability to, you know, allow access to applications that may be okay, but are not necessarily something that you believe are part of your sanctioned application set. So with that, really, you know, I kind of wanted to summarize that, you know, all of these capabilities are available as part of Workspace Standard today. You can request a free trial. Go to citrix.cloud.com, and we have a blog that actually also talks about many of these capabilities. So that's really the core functionality. I think we can take some questions and kind of look at what kind of feedback people may have.
So Praveen, as of right now, nobody has submitted any questions, and I know that we are early on the ending of the demos. If anyone has any questions, we'll stay online for a few minutes just to give you time to type them in, and we will answer them live. If not, please feel free to email me afterwards with any questions, and I will get them answered from Praveen and team.
All right. Yeah, let's do this straight. We had planned for some good amount of time from a question and answer perspective in case anybody wanted to deep dive on any specific topic. Okay, so we have a question. Can you change the location of the watermark? That's a great question. Not yet. We are looking at ways to enhance the watermarking capability. So, it can be tilted or it can actually be, changed the way you'd like to. So that is something that we are considering now as a future enhancement. Yes, so both for from the standpoint of location as well as how that wording might look like, the different ways in which you can configure how that watermarking actually looks like. That is something that we're looking at as a future enhancement. Okay, one other question. Does Citrix have its own MFA? So yes. So what I showed you earlier in the presentation was the native two-factor authentication capability, which is actually delivered completely natively within the cloud. So that is fully Citrix owned. Citrix also has the gateway on-prem capability, which actually has pretty advanced multi-factor auth, where we can federate access or connect to some of the other two-factor providers. So yes, we do have these capabilities available within the Citrix solution. We have another question here. Is publishing SaaS application the only function, or it could be directly be allowed from ADC on-prem without publishing on storefront? So just to clarify, and so that I kind of make sure I understand the question correctly. So what you're asking is that can we access the SaaS applications within storefront with an ADC appliance? So the answer is no. You do need the workspace, because the access control capability is part of the overall workspace security functionality, and what you need is the actual entitlement and capability to use that within the workspace. Now, you can continue to use your Citrix ADC for gateway functionality. Let's say for that may be required for either load balancing or authentication capability. So you can continue to do that, but the actual SaaS access is governed through workspace. I hope that answers your question. Okay, got it. So your follow-up question was, I was trying to implement this SSO from ADC to SaaS application. So yes, so the security controls that we talked about, they are not available within ADC. They are available only in cloud. Okay, let's wait, Kevin, maybe for a few more minutes to see if the number of questions that are coming in.
We can wait a few more.
And remember, you can always reach out to us offline as well, or go to citrix.com and get more details about how the capabilities work. We have a pretty good documentation also on configuring all the SaaS and web applications, as well as a pretty detailed guide on access control that you can use to kickstart a trial. And if you go to citrix.cloud.com, you can actually sign up for this free trial automatically. It does require us to approve, but we'll be able to provide an approval if you are interested in actually kicking the tires in your own setup.
And Praveen, it looks like we have 2 more questions that came in.
Excellent. Okay. Is there a way of also locking down applications So I'm not sure I understand exactly what that means, but let me try to sort of, when you mean locking down applications, are you referring to providing, not granting access to an application itself entirely? And if that is the case, you can do so by restricting which users you actually configure this app. So it can be obviously based on a specific AD group or a very specific user itself, but that is how you might be able to, lock them out from getting any access to that application. But once you do have that configured on their workspace, then you can't necessarily lock access. They will be able to access it, but with the controls that you have put in place. Okay, we have another question. When we create managed desktops on Citrix through Azure, do we have to give Azure tenant access to Citrix so Citrix could manage, patch, and update managed desktops on Azure? Not sure if this is relevant to this presentation. So I think you're asking a question that is more towards the managed desktop. The focus of today's topic is, today's presentation is primarily on access control. So that would be a separate follow-up that we can actually do with the product manager who handles that area. Okay, so I think we have clarification on the actual question. So example, not allowing setup.exe to run. So currently we don't have that capability yet. We are looking at ways to enhance. So if you maybe what we could do is if you could just follow up on your request and provide us a little bit of a detailed use case on what you would like to achieve, and send that over to Kevin. Then maybe we'll make sure that we can work with our appropriate teams and develop that further and get a good understanding of your requirement. Maybe that's something that we can actually add as an enhancement on our roadmap.
So I will
looks
follow
like,
up
yeah.
and Michael after this, since they do have questions that are a little outside the scope of today's webinar. Sound good?
Right. So Kevin, looks like we don't have any more questions. So if you want to, sort of have any closing thoughts, so we can then, close the webinar.
Yes, sir. I just wanted to thank everybody that attended today, and I will be sending out follow-up emails after today's webinar. If you have any questions, please feel free to reply to those emails, and I will work with you to get the correct answers from the proper teams. Again, thank you for attending today's webinar. Have a great day.
Thank you.